to another Huddle Breakdown Extra Time. I'm your host Martin Murphy, and joined as ever by James and by Alan, but also our friend Patrick Caskie, who's joining us again. Patrick, for those of you who tuned in before, may well remember Patrick, a Rangers fan, an analyst, and he'll be giving his views on the recent Glasgow derby. It's always great to get the view from the other side of the hill, see ourselves as others see us, as they say. But also, just before we get into things, really, just like to mention some charity work that Patrick's doing. He and his brother are running a marathon, I think, for a tremendously good cause. So, Patrick, if you'd like to maybe explain a little bit about what it is and how any of our listeners can maybe donate if they should so wish.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for having me on. So my brother and I live in Manchester, he lives in Southampton, and we're taking on the respective marathons in April, the 6th of April and then the 27th, to raise funds for Defence for Children International's Palestine branch. They've been working since 1991, mainly focused on 5 key issues, sort of advocating for the rights of Palestinian children who are in military and domestic courts in Israel, as well as child recruitment for any sort of assaults and stuff like that. I'm mainly looking through the framework of a right to a childhood. You could donate through a link which is on my Twitter, which I would love if would be shared on the Substack. But I think importantly to recognize is that there's a number of other causes, whether it be providing funds to a family through a GoFundMe or other charities, that if you would prefer, you should definitely donate to them. The point of this is not necessarily for us to get funds, but it's more so either you can use through our link, or it's to sort of promote people to then think, oh, are there any other charities I could maybe provide £5 a month to? So any sort of foundation or donations would be appreciated. We already reached our first donation goal, working into our second one. So everything now is extra. But if you would love to donate to any of the individual family funds, maybe Doctors Without Borders, all valuable causes.
That's absolutely terrific, and I say I'll certainly be having a look at that, and I'm sure I'll get a donation in there, so really well done. To get back on track, really, I suppose, Patrick, I'd like to kind of ask you a kind of two-pronged question, quite a general one. Then I'll let the guys get into the bones of things, because as I said earlier, I think it's always really interesting to get different views. But I suppose, first of all, be interested to hear what your view is on the Rangers management team at the moment. I have to say, when they were first appointed, it was quite a jocular mood, but a couple of good results recently, so it'd be kind of really interesting to get your take on that briefly. But also, from your point of view, looking at opposition and so forth, when you were looking at Celtic, what weaknesses did you see that you thought, okay, well, Rangers could certainly exploit Celtic in that sense? And then, as I say, the guys will, get into things a little bit, and then afterwards we'll kind of have the kind of proper Celtic discussion, I suppose, and get into the angst of it all and the ins and outs of it. So, Patrick. Yeah,
I mean, the management team was a surprise, in the sense I was surprised that they didn't go with just who was in-house, but I guess the group of 3 or 4 staunch individuals who've been brought on have done well in respect to the big competitions, but furthermore have also overseen some of the worst results. The Motherwell at home was a terrible game. I do think, or maybe convincing myself, that there is no capacity or timeline in which they get hired. I think the best piece of evidence for that is that we fired Van Bronckhorst 3 months after winning the Europa League. So obviously, knock on wood, I'd love to win the Europa League, but I don't even think that is the sort of criteria or threshold which would get them full-time. I think Ferguson, if anything, is sort of working towards a backroom staff coaching role, which on the basis of the rest of his CV seems a bit untenable, but it's about what you do here and now, I guess. And they've not really done much different. I appreciate that there's a lot of sort of benchmarking towards the fact that there was a different shape that started the game out against Celtic, which is an indication for a lot of people that we're doing something different. But I think shape is vastly overblown in terms of the importance in football, because the principles were still the same. it was basically a carbon copy of the January game, which went so well. So with respect to the question of what were we looking at from like a Rangers point of view, it was just to repeat that performance. There was a sort of blueprint set out, not in the sense of like the late stage Gerrard blueprint, which was more so a tenable, sustainable approach to taking on a Rodgers team, which manifested in far more convincing wins, whether that be anecdotally from watching it or the XG when we were getting wins, which were pretty substantial. The January one was, I think, an almost 2 XG win, but I think that was the most outliers of outlierish performances from Celtic. I don't think you'll ever really see them put on a performance like that. They sort of made us look like, both in the numbers and in the game, like a high-level Champions League team. The only sort of teams who take Celtic for 1.5 plus XGD consistently are those Bayern Munichs, Dortmund, whatever you'd like to say. So it was mainly repeating what we had done previously. I would be lying if I didn't pretend like I haven't sort of paid less attention to Celtic since the league is over, per se. I'm not the biggest watcher of Celtic in any capacity, but I will usually watch the games.
You don't know what you're missing out on, Patrick.
But I do think, like with most fans, you'll watch from the other side. But when the league is wrapped up, that becomes a bit less interesting. So from like a tactical point of view, it was just building on the January stuff, which I thought we did well. But that was as much us playing up as it was Celtic playing down and providing 2 uncharacteristic performances.
Yeah, was there anything in particular specifically, because one of the things that we'd talked about beforehand was, with McGregor and so forth, and the way that Rangers had kind of nullified him. And I thought it was interesting coming up to the game, obviously no McGregor and, a couple of other changes, especially in central defence with neither Trusty nor Scales involved. Did you feel that that really helped the Rangers to achieve the result they did?
Yeah, I had messaged my brother. I didn't realise Mike Navrocki was still at Celtic. I thought he was farmed out on loan somewhere as well. But then I would have realised I would have
Lagerbielke.
Yeah, like Lagerbielke.
We have a few squad players like this that you probably forgot
or like
about.
Thiago Holm was sent to America, so I thought he was sent to like the Zweite Bundesliga or somewhere like that, and he was doing fine, and they'd maybe get the money back on him. So I guess from that perspective, Callum McGregor did not play well in the January Old Firm, but again, that's a bit of a misnomer. You would rather, even an out of form McGregor is still a positive. Him being there, so his absence in the sheet is obviously good. Also from a narrative point of view, as much as the sort of like the leadership and the consistency there is almost an objective that you have to climb over before the game, because he is just like a consistent winner, kind of epitomizes the Celtic team, and that's a identity which we've failed to forge in the last few years. I think we've won 2 or 3 times since Gerrard, something like that. And I guess
We hope you enjoyed this free preview from all of us here at the Huddle Breakdown. We know you have options and we really appreciate you tuning in. To hear the rest of this episode and for much more Huddle Breakdown content, head on over to www.huddlebreakdown.com. We hope you consider subscribing. Thank you.